Hey, what's going on, everyone? Today we're going to do a little comparison on my Rebel build versus the Moose build. Should be interesting.
Oh man, the lighting's wrong for full flex. So, when you have a truck like the Moose, sometimes you gotta clear some trails. So this little Milwaukee
Alright, so in this video we're going to talk about some of the features of the Ram Rebel that I used to have. I had a 2017 Mojave Sand Edition Ram Rebel for a little while, and that's kind of, when I had that truck, that's kind of when I got into this wonderful thing we call overlanding. And then started building that up over the course of, I think, maybe like a year or so. And then decided that I wanted to change it up a bit and ordered a 2021 Ram 2500 and have built that out. Now I'm in like the last stages. Everything major is pretty much done with the build. Now it's just kind of doing some fine tuning and adding little things here and there. So I got some talking points just about some of the more major stuff. I'm not going to get into fine details. But first off, let's talk about the size difference. Obviously the Ram Rebel is a 1500 series truck and the Moose is a 2500, so obviously the Moose is going to be a bigger vehicle. With that, the Rebel was on a 4-inch AEV lift and 4-corner air suspension, and the Moose build is on a 3 1/4 full Carly pin top system with 40s, and the Ram Rebel had 35s on it. So that's kind of going to be like the base of what we're going to be talking about. The Ram Rebel, I'll show a picture of it too, so you guys can kind of get a visual if you're not familiar with the Rebel, but I will link the build video that I did for that when I did have that. So it wasn't really a complete build, I want to say, because there were still a lot of things that I could go, but I mean it was a pretty capable little vehicle. I did some fun things with it. Went up the back side of Daniel in the Yories, and then I did take it out on I want to say it was like a 7-day trip throughout Colorado a little bit and into Moab, Utah. So last year I ended up trading that truck in for the Moose build, is what I was going to end up calling it. It was is a 2021 Ram 2500 Layer Me. I was very particular on the things that I wanted with this truck, and I spent a lot of time and hours on the builder and just discussing like what's really needed, what's not needed, what kind of things do I want, what kind of things don't I want. That's the nice thing with the builder, you know, you can kind of get the things you want and only pay for the things you want, I should say, and not pay for stuff that you don't, 'cause stuff's expensive. So the size difference in the two, the Moose, obviously it's bigger, right? And being in Michigan, most of like the, I guess we'll call it trails, or the more technical kind of trails, they're Jeep trails, so it is very tight. And I have shoved that truck down some trails where on both the kickouts on my rear bumper I had like maybe an inch or two because the trees were just so tight. I didn't really get to wheel the Rebel much up here. Usually that was all, you know, kind of out west where it was more so open stuff. And in North Carolina, I mean the Daniel Trail was tight. With those trails kind of being more so for like Jeeps and mid-sizes and stuff like that. So that was probably the only like, what you call it, butt-bucker trails that I've took the Rebel on. But everything else was pretty much open, so I didn't really run into that issue really until I got the Moose build. So with that being said, they're both technically full-size builds, so not really too much of a difference there. So The Rebel has the independent front suspension, and it's on the 4-corner air ride. Then the Moose is a solid axle, you know, heavy duty truck. So even when the Rebel was stock, it drove really nice. And after I lifted it, and because the 4-inch AEV lift I had out at the time, I'm not sure if that's a thing still anymore, but I didn't really notice any kind of a difference in ride quality with that lift. I'm pretty sure it was a basic lift, you know, and it extended out my airbags a little bit, and that was it. Not really a difference in ride quality. So yeah, but with the Moose, ride quality was substantially upgraded with the lift kit. I did a kind of like a series where I had the base kit, the base pin top for a little bit, and then I brought it in a second time once the rest of the, I guess they call it the Carly catalog, came in. So sway bar, control arms, or radius arms, and you know, all that other little stuff, ball joints. So wheeling the Moose and the Rebel, there's been a couple times where I've been on like 3 wheels, and there's only been one time that I've had the Moose on 2 wheels, 2 adjacent wheels, and but that was kind of me trying out some things I probably shouldn't have been trying out. But the independent front suspension is obviously a more comfortable ride than like a solid axle. Now with that being said, again, the Rebel was on 4-corner air suspension, so it, even off-road, it was very comfortable. And then when I actually did take the Moose trail riding, when I had stock suspension, I had the 40s on, but it was on stock suspension, and let me tell you, it was rough. It was really rough. That was the fall, I think it's called the fall color run I did with New Holland Overland. It's an event he hosts in the fall, and yeah, that was rough. And from that, the ride quality with this Carly is just absolutely phenomenal. It is night and day difference. The truck, you know, granted, I drive the truck every day, so I'm used to it. But I have friends that drive solid axle vehicles, whether it be another Ram 2500 or, you know, what have you, with different suspension upgrades and everything, and they're like, this is like unreal how smooth this thing rides, even off-road. So that's a really cool thing there. Now, again, you're looking at 2 totally different, you know, lifts and suspensions, so gotta take that for what it's worth. I would say that the solid axle performed better off-road. In Moab, it did get a little flexy, not too much on Daniel, but yeah, that's just kind of my 2 thoughts on that. I don't have a ton of experience wheeling in the Rebel, so I don't want to get all crazy and say like solid axe the way to go, because I still consider myself a novice in this whole, you know, overlanding, off-roading thing. So take it for what it's worth. So we always kind of talked about suspension and tires. Now I mentioned probably 4 times already that the Rebel was on a 4-inch AEV air suspension lift on 18-inch wheels and 35-inch BF Goodrich KO2s. Did great. It was awesome. It was comfortable. Did have times where flexing out, you know, especially in Moab, where I'd have 1 wheel off the ground at times. This past trip to Kentucky, the Overland Red event, yeah, it's a 3/4 inch lift on the Moose, but having those 40s, there were certain parts of the trail where, like, some of the other vehicles, where their wheels would get like 2-3 feet off the ground from, you know, flexing out or what have you, and the Moose, just all 4 tires maintained contact, and it just coasted over it, which Greg mentioned that the truck was making it look so easy compared to like some of the other vehicles that are, you know, doing this, and 1 wheel's off the ground and they're just at crazy flex angles, and the the amount of suspension travel and clearance and just everything that truck has incorporated into it, it was just coasting over stuff. I didn't so much notice that with the Rebel, but I would say the only real wheeling I did with that was out in Moab. None of the trails we did in Colorado were technical by any means. Then the backside of Daniel, it's kind of hit or miss, but that was like my first real time wheeling, so I was pretty nervous and didn't want to like go do anything crazy. And with that trip to the Uaris, 2 weeks later I was leaving for the Moab trip, so the last thing I wanted to do was break something, which fortunately I did not. Now going on to the bed setups, when I bought the Rebel, one thing I wanted was the ram boxes, and this was before I even knew what overlanding was. I was like, that is the coolest thing, you know, having toolboxes on the side, because the truck I had before just had, you know, the normal toolbox in the bed you can buy from like Lowe's or whatever. I think is where I got mine, but the ram boxes was something I really wanted, and I loved it. I still think they're a great idea. On the Moose, it doesn't have ram boxes. I should say this. Let me backtrack here. So, the bed setup that I had on the Rebel was the ram boxes. I had a Diamondback HD, and then it was just some like cheapy, I think I got it off Amazon for like $200. It was like a AAA, I think was the brand name. Rack. It's like a rack that's meant to go on top of like cargo vans and stuff. And the one that I got was just wide enough for the Diamondback to where I could open the ram boxes and it wouldn't hit anything or impede that. So I got that, and which keeping the tent on the truck mostly because that's what I did most of the time, because it was kind of a pain to, you know, take off, put on, whatever. And with that, the tent actually sat below the roof line, so it wasn't like now what I have with the Moose where the entire tent is above the roof of the truck, dragging wind. It was actually pretty aerodynamic on the Rebel, and that was a really, really nice thing. Plus, with setting up and taking down the tent, it was so easy to do, because with the ram boxes, you almost had like two platforms that you could like get up and step on to get the tent and what have you. Only thing I didn't like, and obviously the more you do stuff, the more experience you gain. The experience I would say I have now, there's definitely some things that I've seen and could have done with the ram boxes that could have made it a little bit better system than what I had, because geez, I think I used one of the sides for like recovery gear and tools, and everything was just kind of thrown in there and not really organized. Which the system I have on the Moose is kind of pretty organized, and that's kind of one thing I'm working on now is just better organization and things like that. So the Moose has a custom all aluminum topper that my buddy over at New Holland Overland built for me. The height of the topper matches the height of the roof of the truck. So like I was saying earlier, the entirety of my tent sits on top of the topper, and the entire tent is exposed, so it drags some air a little bit, and that is like pushing 9 feet off the ground, so it's a pain to do that soft top, which is another reason why I'm going to go to hard top, but we're not talking about that right now. So space between the two, the Rebel had a 5'4", I think is what it's on one of those, and then a 5'7" bed, and then the Moose has a 6'4" bed. So obviously the Moose has a lot more storage to it, but the nice thing with the Rebel is having those ram boxes. A lot of stuff that I would put in the truck or in the cab could move to those, so it's almost like now on the Moose, one of the sides of the topper is a cubby for tools and recovery gear, so which I mentioned earlier, I could do that, and then I had another bin that I could put whatever in, and I had a bin system where it was really easy. They all fit really nice under the Diamondback, and the Diamondback was, weatherproof. So it was really nice to just throw stuff in, if I'm going to go on a trip. And that was it. It was just a really simple, easy system. And my only gripe with the system that I have on the Moose right now is having that soft top rooftop tent. Doing events like Core and Overland the Red, where you're going out every day to go wheeling or go explore, whatever you're doing, especially by myself, it's not fun. I mean, is it the worst thing in the world? Absolutely not. But when I see people that'll go up and pop their 2 latches and throw it up, pull out their ladder, and they're pretty much set up, all on one side, I was like, okay, I think I need to do that. So originally with a Rebel build, I wanted to do like a bed rack, right? Because that's like that's the big thing. If you have a truck bed, everybody automatically goes to like a bed rack. But now I know up top Overland actually does make a bed rack for the Ram box, which is pretty sweet. But obviously I've now having a closed-in bed, because I did have an up top rack on the Moose for, I don't know, the first half of its life so far, and just with rain, snow, dust, all that, I just got tired of cleaning everything off. Yeah, everything was in bins, but it was just kind of a pain, so I wanted something that was just completely sealed off, and for me, I think that's the way to go. On the Moose, the other difficulty is just how high up the truck is. Like even, so one side of the Moose is a cubby, the other side is just like access into the bed itself. So like, I have a dual swing out on the Moose, so last thing I want to do is undo the top of the topper, then pull my tailgate down, if I just need something simple out of there. So this allows me to just go on the side, pop the hatch, and grab a, coaxer or whatever. So that's a challenge in itself. Now, I don't think it'd be that much worse, or I should say that much better if I was on like 37s, but, I think the system that I have worked out with the 40s just goes so well with it. I think it just fit the truck very well, especially with me having like the cutout for the wheel wells. It'd look weird if I went to 37s. So there's definitely some difficulties when it comes to the Moose, and that's purely just the height of the truck. Not being able to go under stuff. Now, granted, with the Rebel, I had a roof rack on there, I had a printer roof rack on it, and then every now and then, depending where I was going, I'd have a big hard case, and it was, I don't know, maybe like 1.5 feet tall, and that added some height, obviously, but even then, you could grab onto the roof rack, get on the sidebars, and get into it, no problem. It's going to be a challenge to do that on the Moose whenever a company does come out with a roof rack that I like. So that's that, I guess, for that one. Now, having the Rebel is a gasser with the 5.7 Hemi, and the Moose has the 6.7 Cummins. You're looking at a diesel in the big truck versus a gasser in the smaller truck. The power output of the diesel has just been awesome. A lot, obviously throwing 40s on, full steel front and rear bumpers, and soon to be rock sliders, the topper tent, all this, and being loaded down for a trip, like, it doesn't care. I don't notice the weight. I haven't noticed the weight. Now, again, the Rebel, all it really had was a suspension. I think when I got the truck, it had like 33s on it, and I only went up to 35s, and the roof rack. So there wasn't really a bunch of weight on the Rebel, so I can't really complain too much on the power output. The Hemi was really nice, but I just don't think it compares to having the diesel. Like, just the amount of sheer torque with all of the things that the Moose has on it, I don't think you can beat it. So yeah. And then the last couple questions are going to be a fun one. Do I miss the Rebel? Absolutely I do. That was like, your first true love, the first vehicle I had for overlanding. So, and I had a lot of good memories in that vehicle too. That's one thing that I have yet to do with the Moose. Now I've gone on a couple of bigger trips, but I built the truck to go out west, and I've owned it for geez, it'll be 2 years in March or May or something like that, and it has yet to go west. But you know, when diesel's creeping up to $6 a gallon, it's a little bit pricey to go from Michigan to out west. So, but just the memories that I had in the Rebel and how just simple but effective it was. And another thing too is with the new products that have came out for those vehicles and the knowledge that I have now, I think back like, wow, that Rebel could have been something really. Like I feel like I could have made that like something crazy or something really good or whatever you want to use. And then probably the last thing I'll say about that is that's where the name Rebel Outdoors came from, is because everything was focused around that truck, whether it be, you know, hunting, fishing, off-roading, overlanding, camping, whatever. Like it was all based around using that Rebel as a platform. So it does feel a little bit weird not having a Rebel and Rebel Outdoors, you know, but it is what it is. Of course, now Ram introduced the 2500s Rebel series with the Cummins in it. But lastly, if I had to go back to a Rebel after the Moose build, like if something bad happened or if, you know, it just came the time, I think I would. Now, of course, they, like I mentioned, they offer the Ram 2500 in a Rebel series now and a 1500. I guess it just depends if I would stick with the same system that I have now, being like a topper with a rooftop tent, or wanting to go back to something similar to like the Diamondback and then having the tent kind of lower down on the vehicle, or even just like a bed rack, you know, to decide whether or not I would want the 1500 or 2500. Now, one issue I do run into, and I don't think it'd be that much differently if I still had the Rebel, is fitting on trails, because I, you know, there's a lot of tight trails around here in Michigan, a lot of Jeep trails, and I feel bad because like when I go out with Joey and rip it outdoors, he's like way ahead of me because this Jeep is just cruising on through the trails, and there's me, you know, going slow because I'm trying not to bash something into a tree on either side of the truck. So would it be a little bit better in the Rebel? Yeah, I think so. So I would have to say, if I still lived in Michigan, I would have to go back to a 1500 Rebel. Now, none of this is to say that I don't love the Moose build. It has been such a learning experience with this vehicle, and just learning about it, learning the vehicle in and out, the things it's capable of. This trip in Kentucky was a real eye-opener and a real confidence builder. Just the stuff that this truck was able to just cruise over and have no issues with. It was, to me at least, you know, kind of crazy, I guess you could say. And, you know, it's like, oh, it's your vehicle and yada yada. Well, you know, I try to be open-minded about a lot of things, and the last thing I want to do is, yeah, I have a, you know, big truck or whatever, but I'm not going to be one of those guys that's walking around thinking I'm better than everybody, because I'm not very experienced in this. I just share my experiences and learning points, we'll call them, with you guys. On the social media, that's one thing I like about doing this. So, yeah. If you guys haven't, go ahead, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thanks for watching. Thanks for staying on if you've been a fan since the Rebel build, and there will be a lot of fun coming up this next year. What's that thing I say at the end of the videos again? Oh yeah. I'll catch you guys in the next one.